Okay, well, I didn't have a video last week. Been quite busy as late. A video takes a few hours to do. One thing, it takes me about three takes to get the video right. And I just spent the last 20 minutes working on a video and then saw that I forgot to hit the record button. So anyway, a few things coming up. I might not have a video next week because there's been a death in the family. My twin sister, her husband passed away, and we don't claim to have the twin telepathy, but when she called a few days ago, I knew exactly what it was. So I'm going to have to be driving 1,500 miles to go to a funeral. Thank you immensely for those who help support me and contribute to my vehicle fund. So I got new tires. It makes a world of difference. The old tires were bald and I had a lot of vibration pulling to the right. New tires I got on last evening, and it makes a world of difference. So I'm much feeling much better. Going to make a safe drive up there. The only thing I dread is traffic around Chicago. That's kind of rough. But anyway. I was wondering what to do for a video, so I said, well, why don't I grab something on Thomas Sidney Jessup? So, and here he is, which we know from if you're uh, looking at a lot of things on Facebook from the Waxahachie group. Of course, General Jesup was commander of forces in Florida from December 1836 to I think around June 1838, about a year and a half. Until then he left Florida. General Zachary Taylor took over. Both these guys, with a reputation, Jessup kind of from Washington, D.C. area, but some interesting connections to General Taylor, which I'll tell in a minute. General Jessup, of course, um, commissioned an officer in 1808. In the War of 1812, he saw a lot of action. He was at the Battle of Lundy's Lane, just over the New York line into, I think, Ontario, Canada, which was one of the costliest battles for the Americans in the War of 1812. All the officer staff was pretty much wounded severely, including Jessup, who had a finger blown off. And from there, he went from an infantry officer in the 25th Infantry. They put him in the Quartermaster Corps, might be due to his injury, but he was a very excellent Army quartermaster, kind of really streamlined and improved the Quartermaster Corps during the Second Seminole War. And of course, they came down to Florida to command the troops in Florida. Went back, it was very influential in the Mexican War for supplying American troops, and finally retired at the beginning of the Civil War in 1861 and died in 1836. And kind of an interesting connection to Zachary Taylor, the next general officer in charge of the uh, forces in Florida. In Louisville, Kentucky, you can visit Zachary Taylor. His gravesite is there, the mausoleum where he's buried is right down the street from where Zachary Taylor's house is. But you cannot visit Taylor's house because it's still privately owned. You can look at the historical marker next to it, but down the street is a house connected to General Jesup called Locust Grove. And this is a historical site you can visit. It's an excellent one. I gotta admit, I have not been there. I've been to Lexington, Kentucky a lot of times, but I need to go to Louisville and see these historic sites in Louisville, including Locust Grove. Kind of interesting, the Jesup connection. Well, it was the last house of William or George Rogers Clark, who we know as Lewis and Clark expedition, and then it passed on. His wife's brother, I guess, William Croghan, passed on to his family at the death of Clark, or I guess he's the one who owned the house, Croghan. He had a son, George Croghan, who was also took part in a significant battle, defense of Fort Stephenson in the War of 1812. And because of his fame, he got a Congressional Medal, and he became head of the quartermaster, not the quartermaster, I'm sorry, the Inspector General Corps in the Army. So he was head of the Inspector General Corps. He was also an outrageous drunk, and his journal has been published in modern times. I'm getting tongue-tied here. And the journal is hilarious because, it looks like about half of it he wrote down when he was drunk doing inspections, and he has no filters. He just lets it all out. Now, his sister, Anne Croghan, married Thomas Sidney Jesup, General Jesup. So this is Jesup's wife. Um, so this house has a connection to General Jesup, who visited several times, right down the street from General Zachary Taylor's home. So it was a small officers' corps in the Army, so there's small connections. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, and I want to talk about the runaway slaves, the Black Seminoles, and here's an engraving. I think this was on Florida memory, Black Seminole. This might be Tiger Tail. Uh, so anyway, I think this is pretty neat. It has a bow. It's not a realistic bow and arrow, but a lot of times the engravings are not so much to true life. They're not photographs. So I want to read a letter with General Jesup, and this is from the Adjutant General Records in 1837. Letters from General Jesup. This one is J 117. Yep, J117. And what it was is that they didn't have Xerox machines back then. They could not make photocopies. So they would get a legal pad and write down a copy of every letter General Jessup was sending out. So they compile a big long ledger of these and would take that and every month send it up to the War Department or the Adjutant General of the Army for their records as well. So they'd have a copy of all the letters. So you'd have the original letter, you'd have the letter that was sent to the War Department, and you'd have the letter kept in the general's adjutant box where he was at. So you'd have three copies of the letters floating around. That's why they say printed in triplicate. And this letter is Tampa Bay, June 8th, 1837. And that's significant because the Seminole and Miccosukee people around Tampa Bay that were gathering to be shipped out to Indian Territory, what we now know as Oklahoma, also called Arkansas at the time. That the great breakout where they uh, were all escaped and ran off in the early morning. I think it was about June 2nd. Osceola and Sam Jones or Abiaka showed up and encouraged all the people to run off, which they did, which really disturbed General Jesup because he had about 25 ships that he had contracted coming into Tampa Bay to remove them to Indian Territory. And basically, he had to send them all the ships away when all the Seminole Miccosukee people had run off. So he writes this letter this later, a few days later, June 8th, and he's writing it to a request of Joseph McBride in Gadsden County, celebrity something. Um, so a local judge or politician inquiring about his escaped slaves. So I'm going to use the N word here because that's what's in the letter, and I'm going to tell you beforehand. This is word for word what was written in 1837. This is a copy of the letter from the microfilm that you can find from the National Archives. Jessup says, Sir, I received your letter on the 23rd ultimo on the 3rd instance and have caused inquiry to be made in relation to the Negroes which you claim under a purchase from the Perrymans, formerly of Florida, but now of Arkansas. The Perrymans were Creek Indians in Florida along the Apalachicola River and Chattahoochee and Flint River. And the Perrymans were also, I think, William Perryman, his daughter, had married William Augustus Bowles. Hold on a minute here. Lydia and her children are in the nation, supposed to be in the Everglades. The other is Linda and her children, even Sally, Millie, Phoebe, Daphne, and Manuel are his wife's and his wife, Easy, were taken away several years ago in English vessels to the Bahamas, where if living, they probably now are. So they're supposedly run off to the Bahamas. From the best information I can obtain, many of the Negroes which have run away from their masters within a few years past, as well as Indian Negroes claimed by the white people, have gone to those islands. I think, if probable, all the Negroes in the nation who can find the means of escape will follow. So, interesting is General Jesup is talking about the what we know as the Underground Railroad, but it's not going north, it's going south. So the Underground Railroad that Jesup is talking about is escaped slaves from their plantations are running into Florida, formerly Spanish Florida, going down to the Everglades and eventually getting British ships to take them to the Bahamas, where there's even a community in Red Bay today, or Andros Island, I believe, where some of their descendants live today. So that's pretty interesting that Jessup describes the Underground Railroad in this letter, so it was no secret that it was going on. So anyway, I thought you'd find that letter interesting and a little bit about General Jesup and a historic site in Kentucky that one of these days I gotta go up and seek because I hear it's very well interpreted, and I'll talk to you later.